we're working to give the American people a giant tax cut for Christmas. We are giving them a big, beautiful Christmas present in the form of a tremendous tax cut.
Welcome back to Velshine Rule. That, of course, was President Trump putting on the pressure, saying he wants the Republican tax plan approved by Christmas.
However, at least two Republican members of Congress, Peter King and Lee Zeldin, both from New York, say they are no votes on the plan in its current form.
Joining us live is Republican Congressman Buddy Carter of the state of Georgia. He's a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, a pharmacist by trade, and owns several pharmacies. Congressman, given the pharmacist by trade, what do you say to all of those sick Americans who depend on that medical expense deduction? They're going to lose it.
Well, but they're going to gain so much. Now, you've got to look at this in its totality.
Hold on, sir. I just want you to answer that first question. What exactly? They're going to lose the medical expense deduction. If they lose that, specifically, what are they going to get on the other side?
Well, what they're going to get is a doubling of their personal deduction. I mean, what we're talking about doing here is doubling the individual deduction, doubling the married deduction. I mean, that in itself is significant.
That's if you don't itemize, but most people itemize. So if you go with the standard deduction, you get a double, but most of us
right,
itemize.
So if you were deducting your medical expenses because they are at a certain level, either for medication or nursing homes or whatever the case is, that by definition that means you're an itemizer.
Well, by definition, I suspect you're right. But keep in mind, when you look at this tax reform package, you've got to look at it in its totality. On average, this is going to save Americans $1,200. I mean, can you imagine what you can do with an extra $1,200 in your pocket? The ripple effect that will have throughout our economy as people spend that money, that's going to help us.
Except, sir, the ripple effect is an assumption. It's not a guarantee. What is guaranteed is that AMT is going away, is that estate tax is going away. Those are huge sums of money that simply don't make sense. Why would you get rid of the AMT, what the richest of the rich people pay? That's a guarantee. The $1,100 that you're speaking about for the middle class is a hopeful assumption based on trickle-down economics.
Well, it's a very hopeful assumption that will come true. Let me tell you, we have got to get our country out of this anemic 1 and 1.5% growth rate that we're in now. That's what you've gotten out of the old tax code. What we've got to do is to grow our economy. This will help us to grow our economy. If we are ever going to our national debt, we got to do three things. We got to cut spending, we got to have entitlement reform, and we've got to grow our way out of it.
Right. So we're at, the president likes to tell you we're at 3% economic growth, right? He says that all the time. The long-term economic growth that we're at is 2.1%, which is kind of where we are, right? It'd be great to get it higher than that. What is it about this bill that you think is going to get us from 2.1 to, let's just be reasonable and say 3? That would be great, right, if we could get 3% on a sustained annual basis.
Well, if we get 3%, that would be reasonable. However, I'm very confident we can get even higher than that. I'm confident we can get up around 4 and even at 5%.
What?
I am. Let me tell you why. The reason why is when you cut corporate tax rates, when you cut it from 35 down to 20%, that's going to be money in people's pockets.
But, no,
that's going to be more jobs.
So you know, sir, Congressman, you know that we've generally got agreement on this. I got agreement from the White House on this the other day that 18.6 is really the effective rate that corporate taxes pay. I understand there are people, maybe, as a pharmacist, maybe your tax rates are higher because you can't get through that many loopholes. But the bottom line is 18.6 is what companies really pay. But if they got a deduction, because at 20 it's going to mean that they pay less, if they got that deduction, how does it make it into people's pockets other than shareholders?
Well, keep in mind what else we're doing in this tax reform.
No, before we move on, sir.
We're closing loopholes, lobbyist loopholes. We're also cutting special interest tax deductions.
Sir,
all of those things are going to make it much more fair, much more beneficial to all Americans.
Please answer the direct question, because in fact, when it comes to corporate taxes, you're not actually closing any of the loopholes. You're just lowering the rate. So those corporations will still be able to employ all of those loopholes and essentially pay even less. How is cutting the corporate...
No, they will not be able to use those loopholes. We are taking those loopholes out of it.
Which ones?
Simplifying. We're making this a more fair tax system.
I mean, the only loophole I saw was closing, eliminating deductions for entertainment expenses. I mean,
we are closing lobbyist loopholes. We are doing away with special interest tax deductions.
Sir,
we are doing away with all of those things, making it more fair, making it more simple. Americans are going to be able to fill out their tax
General Electric, which pays virtually nothing. One of the reasons why the effective rate is about 18.6% is that companies like GE don't pay taxes. They somehow manage to get around every kind of tax. Are you telling me that General Electric's going to pay 20% corporate tax?
What I'm telling you is that a lot of those tax deductions, a lot of those loopholes, we are closing those. We are simplifying this.
Please tell me one loophole. Please tell me one corporate loophole that you're closing. Just one.
We are closing more than one. We're closing many.
Please give me a specific
one. And what this is going to do is it's going to simplify our tax system.
I'm asking you to give me a specific example of a loophole that's being closed.
This bill has still got to be marked up in the Ways and Means Committee, but the framework that has been rolled out thus far shows us exactly what we're going to be looking at. Well, this is what the Ways and Means Committee is working on. This is what they're going to be marking up, what we will be voting on before Thanksgiving. I can assure you this is much, much better than what we've got now.
Okay, so I tell you what, given that we have such a good relationship, and you've come on my show and you even got me into trouble once,
yes.
Why don't you do this? We'll both do the same thing. Let's figure out what some of these specific loopholes are that'll cause companies to actually pay 20%, because if you're right, I'm on board with that idea. I suspect that we don't actually have those things. I believe that you believe that we do, and
he knows,
it's hard to.
He knows better than us.
Right, but you know, it's a long bill, and everybody hasn't had a chance to work for it. So if I'm going to invite you back right now. That let's talk about this again once we have some sense of whether those loopholes will actually mean that companies pay that. Then we can determine whether or not they've got benefit to the public. Right.
Fair enough. I look forward to it.
Congressman, good to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congressman Buddy Carter, who's not just a congressman, but he's a businessman. So we're gonna enjoy this.